My phone lit up with a text from Sarah. "Meeting with the girls tonight. Don't wait up for dinner. Happy Valentine's Day. Love you." At that exact moment, I was sitting 2 tables behind her in a steakhouse in Oak Brook, watching her kiss another man like I'd never existed. And just as I stood up to walk over there, a stranger reached out, stopped me, and whispered, "Stay calm. The real show is about to begin." Valentine's Day fell on a Thursday that year, cold enough that the wind off the parking lot stung your face, but not cold enough to keep people home. The restaurants around Oak Brook Mall were packed with couples carrying roses and those glossy red gift bags. Sarah had texted me around 5. Meeting ran late, going straight to the bar with some colleagues. Don't wait up. I stared at the screen for a long time in my office downtown, the background noise of the trading floor fading away. It wasn't the first time she'd canceled plans. Work had been her favorite excuse lately. Still, something about that text bothered me. Maybe it was the way she added the heart emoji like an afterthought, so instead of ordering takeout and heading home to an empty apartment, I grabbed my coat and drove out to Oak Brook. There's a steakhouse there, Gibson's, the kind of place people go for anniversaries, business deals, or apologies that cost at least $200. The parking lot was nearly full. Inside, the restaurant smelled like grilled steak, butter, and expensive perfume. Low lighting, dark wood, quiet jazz drifting through the room. Couples leaned close across candlelit tables. I told the hostess it was just me. She gave me a sympathetic little smile and sat me near the back by the bar. At first, I didn't even notice her. I was studying the menu when I heard a laugh across the room. Sarah had a very specific laugh, bright and musical. I looked up 2 tables ahead of me in a corner booth. Sarah. She was leaning toward a man I'd never seen before. He had dark hair, maybe mid-40s, the kind of expensive suit that doesn't come off the rack. Confident posture, the kind of man who looked comfortable in places like this. My brain tried to explain it away. Maybe a client, maybe a colleague she'd mentioned. Then the man reached across the table and touched her hand. Not casually. The way a man touches someone he already knows very well. I felt something cold slide down my spine. The waiter arrived at my table. "Can I start you with a drink?" "Just water," I said. I wasn't really watching them at first, not directly. Just quick glances over the edge of the menu. Sarah leaned closer. The man said something that made her grin. Then she touched his cheek and then they kissed. Not a polite peck. A slow, familiar kiss. For a moment, I couldn't move. The restaurant noise faded. Forks against plates, glasses clinking, conversations around me. It all sounded far away. 15 years. 15 years of mortgage payments, vacations, late-night conversations about having kids someday, and here she was kissing someone else on Valentine's Day. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraped softly against the floor. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just knew I needed to walk over there, needed to stand in front of her and see her face when she realized I'd seen everything. I had taken maybe 2 steps toward their table when a hand caught my wrist. Not hard, just firm enough to stop me. I turned, startled. A man sat at the table beside mine, early 60s, gray hair, tired eyes. He wore a navy sweater and had a half-finished glass of bourbon in front of him. He nodded toward Sarah's booth. "Stay calm," he said quietly. I pulled my arm back. "Excuse me. If you walk over there right now," he said, "they'll lie better." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He sighed and rubbed his forehead like a man who hadn't slept much lately. "Because that," he said, nodding toward the booth again, "is my wife." I blinked. "Well, what?" "The woman in the black dress," he said. "Rebecca." For a second I thought he might be joking or confused. Then he held out his hand. "Michael Chen," he said, "Downers Grove." I shook it automatically. "David Marcus." Michael looked back toward the booth. Sarah and the man were talking again, leaning close like 2 people in their own private world. "I've been sitting here about 20 minutes, Michael said. "Figured tonight I'd finally see if my suspicions were right." And I asked. He gave a tired little smile. "Well," he said, "I guess we both got our answer." I sank slowly back into my chair. My legs felt weak. Michael watched them carefully. "Don't make a scene," he said. "Not yet." I wasn't planning to throw a drink at him, I muttered. Good, Michael said, because that would actually make this easier for them. I frowned. What do you mean? Instead of answering, Michael pointed subtly toward their table. Watch! The man reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out an envelope, not a small one, a thick letter-sized envelope. He slid it across the table. Sarah took it, opened it just slightly, then nodded. A moment later, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. She handed it to him. They spoke quietly. He glanced around the room once quickly. Then he slipped the folder inside his jacket. My stomach tightened. That didn't look like flirting. That looked like business. Michael leaned closer so no one else could hear. I've been following her for a week, he said. Hired a private investigator. You hired a private investigator? I asked. He nodded. Found out she's been meeting someone. Same guy, different places. I looked toward the man again, toward the person who was meeting my wife in secret. What kind of places? I asked quietly. Michael hesitated. Then he said, Law offices. The words landed like a stone in my chest. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Across the room, the man signaled the waiter for the check. Sarah touched his hand again. Another quick kiss. Michael exhaled slowly. Then he said something that made the back of my neck prickle. If I'm right, he murmured, your wife isn't just cheating. I turned toward him. What do you mean? Michael looked straight at me and in a calm, almost apologetic voice he said, She's planning something. He glanced back toward Sarah and the man as they stood from the booth. Then he added quietly, And whatever it is, it involves you. The cold air hit my face the moment I stepped outside. Oakbrook in February has that sharp, dry wind that cuts right through your coat. I stood near the entrance of the restaurant for a second, trying to slow my breathing. Inside, couples were still laughing and clinking glasses. Out here, the parking lot lights buzzed softly above rows of expensive cars. Michael came out a minute later. Sarah and the man had already left through the side exit. Michael walked over beside me and shoved his hands in his pockets. Well, he said quietly, that went about as badly as expected. I let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. I still can't believe that just happened. Yeah, he said. Took me a while to get used to it, too. For a moment, we both just stood there watching cars move through the lot. Then Michael pulled out his phone. Look, he said. He turned the screen toward me. There were photos, not many, but enough. One showed Sarah and the man walking out of a hotel lobby. Another showed them sitting at a small cafe patio somewhere. Dates were visible on the corner of each photo. 2 months ago, 3 weeks ago, last Thursday. My throat tightened. How long have you known? I asked. Suspected a couple months, Michael shrugged. Known for sure about 4 days. I looked back toward the side of the building where the man's car had been parked. Why tonight? Michael rubbed the back of his neck. Private investigator said this dinner looked important. Important how? He swiped to another photo. This one made my stomach drop. Sarah and the man walking into a small brick office building. Above the door was a sign, Anderson and Pike, Family Law. I stared at it. You think they're planning a divorce? Michael shook his head slowly. Maybe, but that's not the part that worried me. What do you mean? He zoomed in on the photo. Sarah was carrying a folder, the same folder the man had handed her tonight. Michael slipped the phone back into his pocket. I've been married 33 years, he said quietly. You start to recognize patterns. What patterns? The kind where people don't just cheat, he said. They plan their exit. I crossed my arms, trying to warm my hands. Sarah had been distant lately, working late more often, spending more time on her phone. But planning something. I wasn't ready to believe that yet. Michael leaned against a concrete pillar near the entrance. Let me ask you something, he said. Has your wife been asking weird questions about money? The question hit harder than I expected. I hesitated. Why? Michael didn't answer right away. He just watched my face. That was enough. I sighed. Some things, I admitted. She asked about refinancing the house last month, and a few weeks ago she asked about my 401k, about whether I'd been making contributions. It seemed random at the time. Michael nodded. Yeah, that tracks. What does that mean? He looked toward the parking lot again before answering. Means your wife might not just be having an affair. Sometimes that reason is money. The wind lifted a few strands of my hair. What are you saying? Michael's voice stayed calm. I'm saying people our age don't usually blow up their lives without a reason. He paused. Sometimes that reason is money. Sarah came home around midnight. I heard her car pull into the garage while I was sitting on the couch with the television on, though I couldn't have told you what show was playing. My heart started pounding again. The garage door opened. Sarah walked in carrying a small white pharmacy bag. Hey, she said casually, you're still up? I looked at her, the same face I'd known for 15 years, the same woman I'd watched kiss another man 4 hours earlier. Yeah, I said, couldn't sleep. She set the bag on the kitchen counter and loosened her scarf. Tonight was interesting, she said. Client dinner ran long. You know how these things go. She moved around the kitchen like everything was normal. Opened the refrigerator, grabbed a bottle of sparkling water. Did you eat? She asked. Yeah, I said. Another lie. Sarah took a drink and sighed dramatically. God, I hate days like this. I watched her carefully. There was no nervousness in her voice, no hesitation, just the same easy tone she'd used for years, which meant one thing. She had absolutely no idea I knew. Sorry about dinner, she added almost as an afterthought. Then she nudged the pharmacy bag toward me. Picked something up for you. I walked over slowly and opened it. Inside was a cheap Valentine's card and a small box of chocolate-covered caramels, generic brand, probably grabbed off a checkout counter. For a second, I almost laughed. 15 years of marriage, and the woman couldn't even lie with effort. Thanks, I said. Sarah kissed my cheek lightly. I'm exhausted, she said, going to take a shower. She headed down the hallway toward the bedroom. The moment the bathroom door closed, I gripped the edge of the counter. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, from the effort of keeping quiet. 10 minutes later, I stepped outside onto the back patio and called Michael. He answered on the second ring. You okay? He asked. Define okay, I said. Michael chuckled softly. Fair. We were both quiet for a moment. Then I said, she came home like nothing happened. That's usually how this works, Michael said. I leaned against the railing. Michael, what exactly do you think they're planning? He hesitated. Then he said, I think your wife is setting up a very clean exit. Clean how? Clean enough that everyone thinks the divorce was your fault. My stomach tightened. What makes you think that? Michael exhaled slowly. Because I've seen something like this before. My brother's wife convinced everyone he was unstable before she left him, said he had anger issues, depression, erratic behavior. By the time she filed for divorce, his own family didn't trust him. I rubbed my forehead. Sarah had recently mentioned to some friends that I seemed stressed, that I wasn't sleeping well. At the time, I thought she was concerned. Now I wasn't so sure. Michael's voice pulled me back. There's one more thing, he said. What? I asked. I had the investigator pull email records connected to Rebecca's business account, and what he found wasn't great. My pulse jumped. What did it say? Michael paused. Then he read one line slowly. David's been under a lot of pressure lately. He drinks more than usual. I'm worried he might need help managing finances soon. The words felt like ice sliding through my chest. That wasn't just cheating. That was a story being built. A story where I looked unstable. I stared out into the dark backyard. So she's not just planning to leave me. Michael didn't answer right away. Then he said the sentence that made everything suddenly clear. No, he said. I think she's planning to take your money too. I didn't sleep much that night. Sarah fell asleep almost immediately after her shower, breathing softly beside me like nothing in the world had changed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady ticking of the old wall clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Every minute felt louder. By 6 a.m, I gave up on sleep completely. Sarah got up around 7, showered, dressed, and grabbed a quick cup of coffee. Big presentation today, she said, buttoning her blouse. Meeting downtown. I'll be late. I nodded. Drive safe. She kissed my forehead like she had 1,000 times before. Then she left. The garage door rumbled shut. and the moment her car pulled out of the driveway, something in my chest shifted. Not calm exactly, but clarity. I walked straight into the small home office Sarah and I shared. The room smelled faintly like printer ink and dust. Sunlight came through the blinds in thin stripes across the desk. For years, Sarah had handled most of the household paperwork, taxes, bills, insurance. I hated that kind of thing. Said numbers made my head hurt, which meant if she was planning something financial, she probably assumed I wouldn't notice until it was too late. I opened the file cabinet. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out the financial folders. I felt ridiculous at first, like I was sneaking around in my own house, but Michael's voice kept replaying in my head. She's planning something. I started with the obvious things: bank statements, credit cards, investment records. At first, everything looked normal. Then I found the first crack. A credit card I didn't recognize. Same bank as our joint card, but a different account number. I pulled the statement. Hotel charges, restaurant tabs, a jewelry store. The dates stretched back almost 3 months. I sat down slowly in the desk chair. 3 months. I kept digging. More statements. A consultation fee from Anderson and Pike Family Law. The same office Michael had shown me in the photo. My chest tightened. I flipped through another folder. Inside was a printed document that made my stomach drop. It was a draft financial summary. Divorce planning paperwork. My name at the top, Sarah's name underneath, and one line that jumped out immediately. Projected relocation of spouse within 60 to 90 days. Relocation of spouse, meaning me. I leaned back in the chair. For a moment, the room felt too quiet, too still. Then another memory surfaced. 2 weeks earlier, Sarah had asked me something while we were cleaning up after dinner. "Is your 401k still in that investment account?" she'd said casually. "The one from when you were at your old company?" "Yeah," I'd said. "Why?" "Just wondering. We should probably review it sometime." Technically, that money was mine, separate property, unless it got mixed with marital accounts, unless someone convinced me to move it. Suddenly, the pieces started fitting together. Sarah hadn't just been cheating. She'd been positioning things slowly, carefully, so when she walked away, she could take more than half. I sat there for a long time, staring at that document. Anger came first, hot and sharp. Then something steadier replaced it. Focus. I pulled out my phone and searched for the name on the law office again. Anderson and Pike. But that wasn't the number I needed. Instead, I called someone Michael had mentioned the night before, James Wilson, divorce attorney. His receptionist answered and transferred me after I explained it was urgent. James's voice was calm and direct. "How can I help you?" I took a breath. "My wife is having an affair," I said, "and I think she's preparing for a divorce I don't know about yet." He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the most practical question possible. "What evidence do you have?" I glanced down at the stack of papers on the desk. More than I expected. "Good," he said. "Can you come in today?" James Wilson had an office above a small insurance agency downtown. Nothing fancy, just beige walls, framed certificates, and a large oak desk covered with neatly organized files. He was in his early 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I handed him the documents. He read quietly for several minutes. Finally, he leaned back. "Well," he said, "your wife's been busy." "You think this is serious?" I asked. James raised one eyebrow. "She's already consulted a lawyer. That usually means the wheels are moving." I felt my throat tighten. "She's been telling people I'm unstable, like I can't handle stress." James nodded slowly. "That's called laying groundwork." "For what?" "For making you look unreliable," he said. "If the divorce turns hostile." I rubbed my hands together nervously. "What do I do?" James folded his hands. "First, you do not confront her." That surprised me. "Why not?" "Because the moment she knows you're aware of the plan, she'll move faster. And if she's targeting your retirement accounts, timing matters." I swallowed. "So what should I do?" James's voice stayed calm. "You document everything, copies of bank records, credit statements, emails, anything financial." Then he added something that made me feel slightly better. "Also, open a separate bank account in your name. Move your income there, quietly." I hesitated. This feels sneaky. James gave a small smile. "No," he said. Sneaky is what she did. This is just paperwork. Over the next 3 days, I became someone Sarah would never have recognized. I copied documents, saved digital records, opened a new checking account at a bank across town. The teller didn't ask many questions. There was one close call. On Wednesday afternoon, I was photographing bank statements with my phone when Sarah called unexpectedly. "Hey," she said, "quick question." My stomach flipped. "Sure. Did you ever think about moving your 401k into a more accessible account, like the one I mentioned?" For a split second, I almost answered honestly, but something stopped me. "No," I said. "I forgot about it." Sarah laughed lightly. "Well, maybe we'll handle that this weekend." "Maybe," I said. When the call ended, my hands shook so badly I had to sit down. That night, Michael called again. "I've got news," he said. "Good or bad?" "Depends how you look at it. The investigator followed them again today. Turns out they're planning a party." "A party?" "Yeah, private banquet room in Lombard this Saturday for an engagement celebration." The words hit me like cold water. Engagement. Sarah introducing her boyfriend to friends, like our marriage was already over. Michael spoke again. "You want to know the funny part?" "What?" "They're inviting people who know you." For a moment, I said nothing. Then something inside me settled. A quiet decision. "Good," I said. Michael paused. "Good? Why?" I looked down at the stack of evidence on my kitchen table. Then I said calmly, "Because that's exactly where we're going to finish this." By Saturday evening, snow had started falling again. Not a storm, just that slow, steady Midwest snowfall that makes the streets look quiet and almost peaceful. The kind of night where people bundle up, go to a party, and assume everything in the world is normal. The banquet hall sat above a small Italian restaurant in Lombard, tucked between a nail salon and a travel agency. I had driven past it a dozen times over the years and never thought much about it. Tonight, the parking lot was full. I sat in my car for a moment before going inside. My hands were steady, which surprised me. All week I had imagined this moment, different versions of it, some where I screamed, some where I cried. But now that it was actually here, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Simple outfit, dark slacks, light blue shirt, charcoal coat. Nothing dramatic, just the way I usually dressed. Because this wasn't theater. This was the end of something and the beginning of something else. I stepped out into the cold and walked inside. Upstairs, the banquet room smelled like pasta sauce and cheap perfume. The place had those fake crystal chandeliers that tried a little too hard to look fancy. Music played quietly from a speaker near the bar. About 30 people were already there. Colleagues, friends, neighbors, people who had known Sarah and me for years. And at the center of the room, standing near a table decorated with red flowers, was Sarah. Next to her stood the man from the restaurant. He was wearing an expensive suit tonight, his dark hair styled carefully. He looked like someone expecting a very good evening. Sarah was laughing with 2 women from her company. Then she saw me. I watched the color drain from her face. It happened instantly, like someone had turned off a light behind her eyes. "David," she said. A few heads turned. The room quieted just slightly. Sarah walked toward me quickly. "What are you doing here?" she asked in a low voice. I smiled politely. "Hello, Sarah." She glanced around nervously. "You weren't invited." "No," I said. "I figured that out." The man was staring at us now. "Sarah," he said cautiously. "What's going on?" Sarah rubbed the back of her neck. "David, maybe we should talk somewhere private." I looked around the room, at people holding glasses of wine, at the decorations that were clearly meant for a celebration. "No," I said calmly. "Actually, I think we should talk right here." Before Sarah could answer, a woman across the room tapped a glass with a spoon. The man's sister, I assumed. "Everyone," she said cheerfully, "can we get your attention for a moment?" People started turning toward her. Sarah leaned closer to me urgently. "David, whatever this is, don't." But I had already stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said. The woman with the glass paused. "Yes?" I smiled politely. "Would it be all right if I said something first?" She looked confused. "Well, I suppose so." Someone handed me the microphone. The room grew quiet. 30 faces looking at me. Sarah looked like she might faint. I took a slow breath. "Good evening," I said. "My name is David Marcus." A murmur rippled through the room. Some people clearly recognized the name. I'm Sarah's husband. The word husband hung in the air like a dropped plate. Sarah stepped forward. "David, stop!" But I kept going. "Earlier this week, my wife sent me a text message." I pulled my phone from my pocket. It said, "Meeting with the girls tonight. Don't wait up. Happy Valentine's Day." A few people exchanged glances. "I believed her," I said, until I walked into a restaurant in Oakbrook and saw her kissing another man. The room was completely silent now. Sarah looked like a woman who had just been pushed off a cliff. "That man," I said gently, "is standing right here tonight." I turned toward him. He looked stunned. Sarah said quickly, "David told me his marriage was already over." "I'm sure he did," I replied. Then I set a folder on the table beside me. And if this were only about an affair, I would have handled it privately. But it isn't. I opened the folder and held up a sheet of paper. A credit card statement showing hotel charges, another paper, a consultation with a divorce attorney, then another, a financial draft assuming I'd be relocated from my own home. Gasps spread through the room. Sarah tried to grab the microphone. "David, this is ridiculous." "Wait," I said calmly. "There's one more thing." At the back of the room, Michael stood up. He had been leaning quietly against the wall near the bar. "Hello," he said. "My name is Michael Chen." He nodded toward Sarah's boyfriend. "And I'm still married to Rebecca, the woman he was planning to marry." That caused a louder reaction. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Sarah turned toward the man. "You told me you were divorced." The man looked trapped. He tried to speak, but Sarah had already stepped away from him. I placed a final envelope on the table. "This," I said to Sarah, "is a copy of everything I've collected. Bank records, emails, legal notes. I've also sent the same documents to my attorney." Sarah's voice cracked. "You're humiliating me." I looked at her for a long moment. "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." From the speaker system near the bar, music suddenly started playing. The DJ, who clearly had no idea what had just happened, had accidentally hit the wrong track. "Let's Stay Together" drifted into the room. For a moment, nobody moved. Then someone rushed over to turn it off. A few people began arguing. Sarah's boss stood across the room with his arms folded, looking furious. The man's family was demanding explanations. Sarah herself looked at him like she had never seen him before. The room had turned into chaos. I stepped away from the microphone and walked toward the door. No one tried to stop me. By the time I reached the parking lot, snow had started falling again. I stood there for a moment in the quiet. Then I took a deep breath. For the first time all week, I felt calm. The first message from Sarah came the next morning. I didn't read it right away. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching snow melt slowly off the backyard fence. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for a long time. Not empty, just peaceful. My phone buzzed again, then again. Finally, I picked it up. "David, please call me. This got out of control." A minute later, "We need to talk." I set the phone back down without answering. 15 years of marriage teaches you something important. You learn the difference between a conversation and an excuse. Sarah didn't come home that night, or the next one. On Monday, she sent another message. "I'm staying at a hotel for a while. We need to discuss the house and finances." I imagined the kind of place she meant. Generic hotel room, Wi-Fi, room service. Not the life she had pictured on Saturday night. Apparently the man hadn't stayed with her either. Michael called me Sunday afternoon. "Well," he said, "that relationship didn't survive the weekend." "What happened?" Michael chuckled softly. "Turns out Sarah wasn't exactly honest about your finances. Seems she told him you had significant assets. When he realized the inheritance money she'd been planning to access wasn't actually that substantial, and that you'd already moved your retirement funds, he disappeared." I leaned back in my chair. She blew up her marriage for a man she'd only known a few months. "Pretty much," Michael said, and when reality set in, he was gone. We both went quiet for a moment. It wasn't funny exactly, but there was a certain grim irony to it. The harder conversation came 2 weeks later. My sister Emma showed up at my door on a Sunday afternoon. She stood in the doorway in a gray coat, arms folded tightly across her chest. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Why did you do that?" Her voice wasn't angry exactly, more confused. "Honey," I said gently, "come inside." She stepped into the kitchen and sat down at the table. "I mean it," she said. "Why would you embarrass Sarah like that in front of everyone?" The question stung. Not because it was unfair, but because it was predictable. I sat across from her. "Sarah didn't tell you what she was planning. She said you've been under a lot of stress, that you've been drinking more, that you acted out at some party." There it was, the story Sarah had been building. I stood up and walked into the office. When I came back, I set a small stack of papers on the table. "What's this?" Emma asked. "Just look," I said. She began flipping through them. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, emails, the financial planning draft. The room stayed quiet while she read. At one point, her eyebrows pulled together. Then she turned to the email Michael had shown me. The one where Sarah wrote that I'd been stressed, that I might have drinking problems, that I couldn't handle finances. Emma sat back slowly. "She told me you were struggling," she said quietly. "I know." She stared down at the papers again. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Finally, she looked up. "I thought you were just being vindictive." "That would have been easier," I said softly. Emma rubbed her forehead. "Sarah said the marriage was over anyway, that she was just trying to protect herself." I shrugged slightly. That's one way to look at it. Silence stretched between us again. Then Emma said something that surprised me. "You know what the worst part is? Everyone was ready to believe her story, ready to think you were the problem, but you were just protecting yourself." It wasn't a full apology, but it was enough. Spring arrived slowly that year. Snow melted. The trees along the street started turning green again. Life didn't magically become perfect. Divorces never do. There were meetings with lawyers, documents to sign, conversations that felt longer than they needed to be. But one thing became clear very quickly. Sarah's plan hadn't worked. James's preparation had closed every door she expected to walk through. My retirement account stayed protected. The house stayed mine for now. And the story she had tried to build about me being unstable collapsed the moment people saw the evidence. The truth is stubborn that way. A few months later, I took a drive up toward Lake Michigan. Just me. No schedule, no explanations. I parked near the water and sat on a bench watching the waves roll in slowly. At 52, starting over sounded terrifying when I first thought about it. But sitting there that afternoon, I realized something. The fear had mostly been about losing a life I thought was secure. Once that illusion disappeared, things looked different. Quieter, simpler, more honest. Sarah thought the cruelest thing she could do was replace me without warning. But the truth is, the cruelest thing would have been letting her succeed. If you've ever had to hold on to your dignity while your heart was breaking, then you probably understand exactly what that feels like. And if this story meant something to you, thank you for listening. Feel free to share your thoughts or experiences. You're not alone in this.